Hey, I'm Hunt, and this is Hunt on LSU, your channel for LSU Fighting Tiger football talk. Enjoy the video. We want you to leave a comment below, hit that like button, and subscribe right below the video. All right,
Let's
let's talk a
enjoy the
lot.
penitentiary together, huh?
Yep, let's talk a little football here. It appears that there's a little bit of drama, or maybe that's too strong a word, under Simeon Barrow at Miami. LSU certainly involved there. Got a visit from him. And once the defensive line market kind of dried up, Brian Kelly said, we're not in the business of buying players. And he kind of got some backlash there of saying that. And all of a sudden, Simeon Barrow seems to not know exactly where he wants to go. Your reaction to kind of that whole thing?
Yeah, Hunt, doesn't that seem just par for the course in this era of football where, nothing really locks you into a school anymore, and NIL is kind of one of those things where, you know, you basically reel a player in by promising as much as you possibly can, and then it seems like maybe when it comes time to cut that check, all of a sudden teams are getting a little fickle. We all saw Florida getting sued
Yeah.
by, what is that, Jaden Rashada, because on signing day they couldn't cough up $1 million or whatever. I mean, and NIL is one of those things that's not, like, moderated. Like, there's nobody overseeing it and looking at it. And we all know that with almost all the defensive tackles in the portal during this spring window, they knew the market for defensive tackles was a desperate one, and we all knew NIL was going to be a massive factor, and teams were going to overpay to get one because there's a lot of desperate teams. LSU was just one of many desperate teams. Well, Brian Kelly took a stance. I think what Brian Kelly wanted to say without saying was, we're willing to pay for a player, but I'm not overpaying a player. I'm not making him the highest paid player or coach on my roster. But I mean, we'll take care of him. And I kind of agree with that. It's like NFL free agency. You are working with finite resources, and you have to spread them in the best way to make your team compete for a championship. So even though there's no cap on it, there's only so much money to be had in the first place. So I don't know with Simeon Barrow. It would be nice to put your hat back in the ring. I think LSU had actually gotten to the point where they got JVR Suggs. I feel good about Jacoby and Guillory, and they're ready to move on. But if his hat's back in the ring and he's not going to be asking for, as much money as Frank Wilson, then I think maybe LSU could do something there. But am I shocked? Should I be shocked, Hunt?
No, I don't think you should be shocked at all. I think that you have, as I was saying, I'm not blaming any individual kids. I'm just speaking kind of in generalizations. Like, you're dealing with 19, 20, 21-year-old people that routinely make bad decisions, and you've got people around them who have ulterior motives here, and it's just it creates a really tough situation for young people. And then on the other side of it, it's like the coaching staff, and then the ultimately the boosters and the collective, like, they've got to determine what's worth it, and then the coach has to weigh how it's going to affect his team chemistry in a volatile locker room. Like, there are just so many factors at play here that make it really, really complicated.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Remember when people were freaking out over Gunnar Kiel deciding to enroll at Notre Dame the day it was time? He just decided which campus to show up with, and they're like, well, we'll fix this madness. We'll create a December signing day, and that won't create any more That'll fix this problem. Yeah, it's a long way from those days. I'll tell you what, you tell me those fickle kids who like to flip and stuff, I mean, until there's a literal dotted line piece of paper, they can do whatever they want. And in these days, even with signing that dotted line, sometimes they're still not locked in. I mean, look at Rashada, who was locked into Florida, and he just said, "All right, I'm gonna hit that portal." Some kids leave Alabama and then re-enroll. They enroll at Iowa and then re-enroll 3 weeks later or whatever. It's a wild world, and the biggest problem with NIL, there's no pen to paper contract binding the parties. Any exchange of money where there's no binding anything is just that's a recipe for chaos. And the reason it works in the NFL is you have that binding situation. Like, all right, you signed up, if you want this money, you have to promise you're not going to go play for the Titans in 3 weeks, and that's the deal.
Are we close to making these athletes employees so that you can put them under contract and put some guardrails on this thing?
Man, Hunt, that most recent NCAA, the lawsuit that got settled where now they can share revenue up to $20 million. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that is. Now, Greg Sankey came out and had an interesting comment and said, yeah, I haven't had any athletes come to me yet say, I want to pay taxes like an employee, which I thought was an interesting comment because if they're getting money, whether it's on a 1099 basis or a W-2 basis, they're having to pay taxes. It's not like the old days where the FBI gets involved because you're getting under the table tax-free payments. I mean, now if you get an NIL, it's at least federally legal by by the law of the land. You're reporting it. So I don't know that that's really a factor. What is a factor is things like, okay, well, do they get health insurance now?
Yeah.
Because they're covered medically for things that happen on the field, but what if something happens, away from the team? Is that necessarily covered? And that's where things get a little sticky, I would say. Do they get workers' comp? Do they, if you get kicked off the team, are you terminated? There's just a lot of worker laws that come into place. I do think we're getting pretty close to something of the sort. And then the fact is, can every team afford to give $20 million? If you look at the athletic department revenues, there's like 4 or 5 departments that turn a profit at all. Now, I'm sure a lot of that is because they're fluffing up their expenses because it's not a for-profit operation. So, okay, sure, we got all this money. Let's buy an extra, locker room or revamp this, so they'll have to adjust the expenses. But I severely doubt that the majority of colleges have $20 million to just give to their athletes because it'll be interesting to see the actual effects of this.
And I think that's the stuff that like nobody that's a fan really wants to talk about, and that's where it's and that's where people start to sour, and it's that kind of deal. To go to the other side of it completely, Bryce Underwood was interviewed earlier this week, and he said, they said, "Are you going to take any visits?" Like, no, I'm not going to take any visits because I committed, and if I'm committed, then I'm not interested in any other visits. How lucky is LSU to have that situation?
Absurdly lucky. I guess in a world full of Simeon Barrows and Gunnar Keels, be a Bryce Underwood, right? And not only him, but Harlem Berry, which that didn't surprise me whatsoever, Harlem Berry. I mean, look, Harlem Berry's dad is one of the few guys who, found me and identified me when I was on the sideline. He's like, hey, yeah, you cover recruiting, huh? Like, yeah, okay, yeah. No, he was involved, man. And he's a good friend. He played football with Frank Wilson, so we kind of all knew Harlem Berry was a hardcore Tiger from day one. To hear that from a kid from Michigan and hear him say things like LSU is a place with a history of developing quarterbacks, what would say 2015 Hunt Palmer say to hear the number one quarterback say, yeah, they have a history of developing quarterbacks? My God, after it was a graveyard for quarterbacks for basically most of 10 years here in Baton Rouge. But that's what 2 Heisman trophies does for you. They really like Joe Sloan. And he said when I was 12 or 13, I grew up watching LSU and wanted to be there. Guess what? When he was 12 or 13, that was about 5 years ago because he's 17. He is young for a quarterback in high school, for a senior quarterback. He's basically a year younger, by the way. That's one thing a lot of people don't recognize about him. He's very, very young. And when he was 12 or 13, that's when Joe Burrow was at LSU. It's kind of one of those remarkable things. Yeah, he was growing up watching Joe Burrow and said, I want to be like that. And it's kind of a remarkable spot LSU's in. I do know their family is considering moving to Baton Rouge pretty soon. It's about as concrete as you can possibly ask for, and that's about as important of a player as you can possibly ask for. Arguably, the biggest recruit LSU has ever landed. LSU has landed number 1 overall recruits before, but they didn't play quarterback, at least as far as I'm aware. I mean, maybe before services got real big, and they certainly wasn't someone out of your recruiting pipeline like a state like Michigan where you might get a player once every 5 years. So it's a little bit of an unreal position that LSU finds itself in with Bryce Underwood.
For sure. And to close things up, last question. We'll let you get back to watching some baseball. Joe Sloan, this is a new position for him, but not in terms of recruiting Bryce Underwood. What's your confidence level in him as he moves into calling the plays and really running the show?
As high as you can be for a guy who's never fully called a plays for a full season. We saw his debut in the bowl game, and it looked pretty good. We do know that Brian Kelly is heavily involved with the offense and play calling, so it's not like he's the head coach of the offense like it was in the Ogeron days, where the coordinators were the head coach of their side of the ball, where they're doing everything. I also know he was very involved in the offense last year in terms of play calling and situational this and that. And part of I understand that they were probably talking about giving him a promotion to co-OC. Now, notable difference: he's not the co-OC; he's the offensive coordinator. Cortez Hankton is the co-OC, which there is a difference. One is above the other, but I suppose Denbrock probably. I'm just reading between the lines here. I haven't talked to Denbrock, but I don't think he liked that they were intending to promote him to co-OC. He's like, man, I just led the number one offense. What are you doing this to me for? So anyways, I'm a Joe Sloan fan. I think he is very bright, up-and-coming mind, and I think the sample size we've gotten of him calling plays has been very good. I have a lot of confidence, as much confidence as you can have in a first-time coordinator is what I have in Joe Sloan.
Thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button. Leave your comments below and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.